Well, it's great to be with you as we enter into this final topic and final time together over this discussion around lordship in our series called King of Hearts, and talking about how Jesus needs to be the King of our heart, the Lord of our lives, and looking at that biblical and theological reality that yes, He is Savior, He is Lord, and we celebrate that for all the reasons we even just sang about in so many pointed ways. And we're thankful for it. But one thing we tend to naturally do is that we distinguish between His conceptual and applicable reality of being both Savior and Lord. It's not one or the other. It's not one over the other. It's both and. And lordship and Lord is terminology that is used consistently, if not more so than even the reality of Savior in the New Testament. So it's something that can't be overlooked, even though for some reason we naturally try to itemize it away. And we talked in our first week that we need to realize that Jesus is Lord and acknowledge and see what that means for us. And in the second week, we realized that surrender is the response. And that surrender to Jesus as Lord is one we do because of what He did for us. And then beyond that, it's something that isn't a part of us only. It is all of us that we surrender. And Pastor Tim last week just absolutely knocked it out of the park. If you did not check it out, ignore my first two messages and listen to his. And go back and watch it on demand. It was absolutely fantastic. He was incredibly vulnerable in sharing about the ideas of idolatry in our lives. The idea that, yes, Jesus should be the Lord over our whole life, but there are times where we will put things in a greater place of significance and priority than Him, that we will make them something that we give our time and our attention and our affections, our treasure even to. And we'll see that word treasure even play out in what we're studying today. And we'll be looking at Matthew 19 in particular, at a story that if you've studied that section of Scripture before, you may be familiar with, but it's what is referred to as the rich young ruler who interacts with Jesus and asks Him some what he believes to be good questions of Jesus on what does it look like to go to heaven, and like all these things that when you read it, hopefully you will go, yeah, I relate to this guy, I empathize with him, and see what all plays out therein. And I side note too, man, it's great to be back with you. I've been gone for about a week and a half. It's the first time in a couple of years that we've been able to go back to our respective hometowns, mine in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and Taylor's in Flowood, Mississippi, which is right outside Jackson, as you all know. You're very familiar. And we were there and visiting with family, which was so great. But as I was there, yes, I got to reflect on the gratitude that comes around the holiday time. So hopefully you had a great time in Thanksgiving and reflecting therein, and even Tim preached some on gratitude as well and what that looks like, and I hope it went well for you. Like I hope it was a good, warm family time. I know that that's aspirational and idealistic, and for some of you, you were just balancing a lot of tension or any number of things, but regardless, hopefully you were able to take some time to self-reflect. Ours was crazy. Did this happen to you? Because it happened to us, where your 4-year-old, there's like a cap on a halogen bulb thing and the recessed lighting, and it pops off, and your 4-year-old picks it up and gets second-degree burns on every single fingertip. Happened to us. Right, that's fun. Having to rock your child to sleep with her hand in a bowl of water. Yeah, that was good. The night before we left to drive back up here, and it's a haul. Like 9 hours, and when you have kids, you just add a lot more hours to that. And so we are gearing up for that, and my baby girl Daisy, she got the stomach flu the night before and just threw up all night. Made sure we were real rested up for that road trip. And I didn't sign up for it. Like the rest of you dads that didn't sign up for it, but about 2 years into marriage, all of a sudden I realized I'm the DD, I'm the designated driver on every road trip. Like we don't share. It's just me going, right? And so I'm doing that. So God made caffeine for a reason. So we made it home, a little bit jittery, but made it. And man, it was a beautiful thing. But we made it home because this is home to us. Even though we went back to our hometowns. And as I reflected over that time, I reflected on things, even in preparation as I was thinking about this message, but on the journey God has taken us from what was our home growing up to what is our home now. It's the longest we've ever lived anywhere. We're going on 6 years now of living in this area, and longest place we've been as a married couple. We've had all our children here. All of my kids will always have St. Louis on their birth certificate. Like, this is home. But that's weird for so many reasons. One, you can probably hear it. Like I apologize to you, but when I go back to Mississippi, my accent re-engages, so it's probably going to be here for a few weeks. But anyways, like there's so much about that that's strange to me. Because one, my kids won't have an accent. They'll have whatever it is you all have, which is just this like neutral nothing. I don't know, like it's just you talk normal is what it is. I'm actually giving you a weird compliment because you go anywhere else in the country and everybody talks with some weird, additional thing. Here we're just kind of like, you can understand us, right? I went home and I didn't understand some people for the first time. I had to be like, what did you say again? I don't want syrup on my coffee. Oh no, that's the size of coffee you asked me. Oh goodness, right? Like, don't understand. Things I take for granted in that regard. But a thing that was an interesting one is that it wasn't easy for us to get to a place where we could call this home. You want me to be very transparent with you this morning at the gates? It wasn't easy. You want to know why it wasn't easy? My family don't live here, friend. We don't have anybody family-wise that lives here. You have become that for us in so many respects, in every respect. Our family lives far away, many, many hours. Not like hey, we'll go for the weekend. It took us 2 years to get back to visit them because it's so far away and balance it with kids and all that. And when we entered into a season of prayerfully considering what God would have for us next, about a year into our marriage, we were praying over that, and we asked a very dangerous question and prayed a very dangerous prayer. And I'm going to ask you to do 2 of those later in the service. But we said, God, what would you have of us? What do you want of us? You are Lord of our life. We want to serve you with our lives. And what does that look like? And do you want us to set roots here in Mississippi and call this home forever and have kids and all that? Or do you want to call us elsewhere? And he said, I'm going to call you elsewhere. And so we left everything we knew that was comfortable and that we knew to be just safe by any measurable. And we walked out in vulnerability into a space where we knew no one. And we lived in North Carolina for a couple of years before we landed here. And prayerfully considering along the way where it was that God was directing and why he was directing us. But hear me, this is what I'm going to get at. Family and home, that whatever that means for you growing up, especially if you look back on it, even currently in a fond way, is good. But it can be an idol. It can be something that lords over you and you give control of your life. Because we could have said, hey, God, here am I, send me as long as you don't ask this. Here is who I am and what I want to do in serving you as long as you don't ask me to change this about myself. As long as you don't ask me to give everything to you. So hear me, the things that can be lord over your life can be intrinsically good things. Family is a great thing. It's a very biblically glorifying, justified thing, but it is not biblically ever framed as something that should rule your life, right? And for you, it might be something like that. It could be, even as we were talking about last week and Pastor Tim was sharing it, it could be difficult things or problematic things in your life that have taken control over you in some capacity or another. And you don't realize it, but you've allowed it to have too much of a significant control and stranglehold over you. And as time has progressed, you don't realize it, but your perspective has shifted in an undue way, and it's no longer wholly focused on Jesus as it should be, but on other things that have taken precedent. And so we're going to look at that today, and specifically through the lens of what is it that you might be missing in reference to where you're at and what may be misprioritized in your life. So I'm hoping 2 things happen here. I'm hoping to push you in a place of deep introspection, and self, understanding, but also a place of self-realization. That it might be that God needs to reveal to you either today or in the coming days something that you've been holding and that you haven't given to Him, and you need to give it to Him. And so that's where we're going in Matthew 19, and we're going to see the rich young ruler in question do that very thing. Hold on to something that he doesn't want to give to Jesus. But hear me, we frame this guy in such a negative lens. And we're going to be picking up in verse 16 of Matthew 19, so you can go ahead and turn there as I kind of give you some context on this passage. But we frame him in such a negative kind of, like if you've ever studied the passage before, we always kind of frame him as this like arrogant, rich jerk. Like is the way that, at least the way it's always been presented to me whenever I've studied it, whether it be through a Bible study, something, or small group study, whatever, like, right? It always seems to be that lens, because if you've read it and you know where the story goes, you kind of retcon it and like rewrite the narrative on the back end. But the problem is that I don't know about you, but as I read this, I really relate to this guy because he's asking in his mind all the right questions. He goes, I'm a decent dude. I've done a lot of good things. Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff. I've got a lot of money I've accrued over the years. That's great. But I'm a good person. And so I want to know what it is to get to heaven and have a relationship with God. And so we're going to see that questioning pan out in Jesus' response. Now, there's some things you need to understand about what's going on in Matthew to truly understand the depth and breadth of what's happening in Matthew 19. So Matthew, being a follower of Jesus, was also previously a tax collector. We've talked about them before when we studied about Zacchaeus, but tax collectors not in good standing, culturally speaking, back then. Fairly universally corrupt, very obsessed with money, all this kind of stuff. So just as when I preach, talk about things that are deep heart points for me, like Star Wars, like it comes up, all right? It's gonna come up. So when Matthew writes, a lot of stuff about money comes up, even more so than you see in the other Gospels, because it's tethered to who he is in his heart and what he's experienced in life. And arguably, it's why he highlights why it can be a problematic thing. And as you're probably gathering, it's going to be the thing that's a pretty linchpin issue for this young ruler. But you need to determine for yourself, not specifically if money's an issue. I mean, you need to know if it is or isn't. But what is your thing? Is it money? Is it something else? Is it a relationship? Is it esteem? Is it renown? Is it a position within your company? Is it, feeling, some feeling from someone else or of love or whatever? Like, what is it? I don't care. Like, what's your thing that it might be not prioritized properly and you aren't handing over to the Lord? So what's happening here is in verse 1 and 2, it establishes that he departed, Jesus and gang, departed from Galilee and went to the region of Judea across the Jordan. And as was typical, large crowds were following him and he was healing people. Now, two instances occur in Matthew 19 leading up to where we're going to pick up in verse 16. One, which is significant, is that the Pharisees and the religious leaders kind of corner him. And they're like, hey, we want to talk to you about your stance on divorce. And they start asking him. And what Jesus does is he alludes back to his sermon in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Now, this is significant. And I imagine if you haven't studied this passage before, you haven't studied it through this lens, because it kind of blew me away as I was studying it. The Sermon on the Mount is of paramount understanding, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, when you are studying Matthew 19, okay? And you will see that. Jesus quotes himself in Matthew 19 from Matthew 5. Okay, he quotes himself on his stance on divorce and what he has said. Most likely because the Pharisees knew what he had said and they were trying to corner him on it. The next instance that occurs is that the little children come up to him, and we've studied that before, and the disciples are like, get out of here. They kick that kid out of here. Like, right, he wants, they're gone. And they just miss it completely, and Jesus is like, what's wrong with you? Bring the children to me. And a lot of the theologians believe that the juxtaposition here is that Jesus highlights the necessity of a childlike faith, but not as we progress in faith, remaining in childlike ignorance, as we're about to see in the rich young ruler. And what you will see in this is that Jesus is clearly in the headspace of the teachings that he did back in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And in this interaction with a rich young ruler, you will see him connect back to the Sermon on the Mount two separate times, and I'll point them out as we get to them. So here's where we pick up with Jesus as someone approaches him. Matthew 19, verse 16. Just then, someone came up and asked him, "Teacher, what good must I do to have eternal life?" What good, what moral, ethical, this is getting to that legalistic thinking of like, I can do enough to gain eternal life, to be with God one day, to go to heaven, that kind of thinking, right? What good must I do to have eternal life? Why do you ask me about what is good? And as you're going to see in a bit, Jesus is going to hone in on this, that he means perfect and complete, like that you are just perfect in such a way that you are truly good before God. He goes, why do you ask me about what is good? He said to him. There's only one who is good. And he's self-reflecting here on both God and himself as fully God, fully man. There's only one perfect person that's ever lived, and it's Jesus. There's only one that's good, okay? And buddy, you ain't it, all right? But you're sitting here acting like you're like, oh no, I'm good though. And if you want to enter into life and keep the commandments, and Jesus, as you're going to see in a minute, means that holistically. He means completely and perfectly. And so the rich young ruler, God bless him, he goes, all right, cool, we're getting there. I thought I was asking the right questions. Let me ask some more. Which ones? Like, okay, so let's narrow it down. I don't know that I understand what you're meaning by keep the commandments. It's pretty broad, Jesus. If you can narrow it down, it'd be great. He goes, which ones? Like, which ones do you want to mean? And so he's already, what I need you to understand as we get going, he's starting in a place of a skewed understanding or perspective of what it means to properly step into relationship with God, all right? And Jesus is going to present this to him clearly. But the first thing I want you to take away from this as we get rolling is moral resolve is fruitless before experience the grace of God. Okay, and the grace of God is the gift that is Jesus, who lived a perfect life, the only one, as he already just said. He died on a cross, and that he conquered death itself 3 days later. And he did all this to be a perfect, spotless lamb, so that we don't have to pay the price, so that we can be justified as we studied, and we'll see yet again in this passage as well, before God, okay? But the issue is for so many of us, our natural thinking, the way we're wired is we go, but surely I've just got to do all this stuff, and that's how it's going to work out, right? Devoid of a relationship with Jesus, I feel like even if, I hope that like the cosmic scales, but when I go before God will be such that he looks at me and goes, I mean, you were pretty rough at times, but buddy, get on in here, you rascal. Like that's the way we kind of view it, right? That it's like the good will outweigh the bad in all this. And we have this moralistic thinking, and Jesus is, as he tends to do, going to flip the script on this reality. Because it's not moral resolve that's going to get you anywhere when it comes to getting closer to God. There's only one who can do that. Let me be more pointed with this and read a passage from Romans 3, verse 21. It says this, but now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been revealed. So righteousness, completeness, perfectness has been revealed and is therefore attainable through what is about to be layered out in Romans 3. Attested by the law and the prophets. And the righteousness of God is through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe, since there is no distinction. 23, and this is the one that really is going to apply to the rich young ruler and potentially even some of us. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And that was a realization that the rich young ruler was not truly understanding or embracing. All of us, we've all sinned. We've all screwed up. Can we be real? This is the idea that we aren't perfect. We're not complete. We're not whole. We haven't upheld the law, even if we break the law once. It's a disqualifier. It puts a gap between us and God that has to be resolved somehow. Like we have to pay for that somehow, or someone else has to pay for us, which is thankfully what was done. Because at the end of the day, like you probably, since you woke up today, disqualified yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like you had something happen in the last 6 hours that you're like, all right, and there it goes. Right, you're like, I'm done. If I was doing good up to this point in life, I screwed up this morning, right? It's just like we are daily flawed, right? That's why we are in need of both the justification we find in Christ Jesus and then the daily sanctification of becoming more and more like him, even in the wake of our brokenness. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. They are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. God presented him as the mercy seat by his blood through faith to demonstrate his righteousness, because in his restraint, God passed over the sins previously committed. This is an allusion to the Passover that occurred when the angel of death passed over the households of the Israelites prior to them escaping Egypt. God presented him to demonstrate his righteousness at the present time, so that he would be just and justify the one who has faith in Jesus. So he still is fully just, because something has to be paid for whenever we are unlawful in who we are against God and what he would have for us. And that payment was Jesus, and therefore we are made right, we are made complete, we are made perfect only through him. But Scripture's clear elsewhere as well with this idea of for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, as we saw there in verse 23, I believe, that later, and in different instances, it's discussed that all of our good works are as filthy rags before God, which is a little bit of a hard pill to swallow. Because at the end of the day, you and I want to be like, but I'm a good person. Like I'm a decent dude. Like I do well by people, I pay my taxes. I don't, if I say bad things in traffic, nobody else is in the car. There's that kind of stuff. Like I'm fine, right? That's the way we think about it. And that's not really how it works. And even if we did a lot of good things and we gave to a lot of charities, gave to church, all that other stuff, right? Like and lived selflessly and went and served in soup kitchens, all that. There's nothing bad with that. But there's also nothing about that saves you. It's all as filthy rags before God. The best metaphor I have for you is if you have a cat or a dog, and I can't make fun of cats alone in this one because dogs are just as guilty of this. They're honestly a little bit more weird about it. Is that, have you ever had a pet that whenever you walk outside on your porch, they're sitting there with some carcass that they've brought to you as a gift of their undying love for you as they have protected your household? You know what I'm talking about? Like cats bring you lizards, snakes, all that kind of stuff, frogs and stuff. Dogs will come up with a decapitated rabbit bleeding out on your front porch like, I love you so much. Like that's, and they're like, this is my beautiful gift to you in our household. You are welcome. Like that's the energy they bring to the table in that moment. And they look at you like, you are crazy if you don't believe that I could not have given you a greater gift right now, okay? And you are looking at them going, I am sad. That was a cute animal once. This is not a good situation. And also gross. It's just not good. And that's kind of the closest metaphor I can give you to God. And when we try to come with our moralistic gifts, like we come and we're like, God, but I did this for you. He's like, you don't get it. Like this is not gonna cut it. But thankfully, through Christ, we have something that's been done for us that can bridge that gap. Now hear me, moral resolve and living a morally and upstanding life is not bad. I don't want you to hear me say that. It is consistently presented throughout Scripture. However, as I say typically, it is the order of things that matters here. So it is not get moral enough that you can now get right with God. It's get right with God and then live in such a way that you will glorify Him with your life as a living act of worship, okay? Motivation matters. The reason for why we're doing something matters. Are you still gonna screw up? You still gonna struggle? You better believe it. But at the end of those moments, are you stopping and recalibrating and redirecting back to the one to whom your heart belongs? Because you started it in the right place. Let's continue. Matthew 19, verse 18. Which ones was that last thing he asked? So which ones? Like narrow it down. Which commandments then do I have to keep? He asked him. And Jesus answered. Now hear me. Before I go into this, think through this lens. He is referencing back to, because of even what he's done earlier in the passage, and later you'll see as well, Sermon on the Mount teachings. And I'll point it out here in a second. It says, do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother and love your neighbor as yourself. And I kind of envision the rich young ruler almost kind of with that like dog-like energy. He's like, awesome, that was great, so exciting. I've done it. I've done all that. Like I did it, and I asked the question, so it sounds like I'm good to go. Yes. Like that's that energy, right? So he goes, I've kept all these. The young man told him, what do I still lack? Just tell me, I'll do it. It sounds like I'm on the right track. I've been asking the right questions. I knew I was living an upstanding life. I am clearly crushing it. Thank you, Jesus, in advance. Okay, what do I lack? Now, hear me. He's just doubled down on his unfortunate ignorance to what he is doing and what Jesus is asking. So, as I told you, Jesus is clearly alluding back to the Sermon on the Mount. He did it earlier in reference to the subject of divorce in this exact same chapter. We're going to see him do it in a little bit as he applies it to treasures in heaven and on earth. And right here, we see two things that in Matthew 5, he framed in a new light that was culturally flipping the script, okay? So he starts and he says, do not murder. Go back to Matthew 5 later if you'd like, and there's a number of statements about a number of things where he says, you've heard it said blank. What I tell you is blank. One of those was, you've heard it said, do not commit murder. I tell you that you cannot hold hate or malice or anything in your heart because that's just as bad. All right? It's the thing that I've talked about before. I wish, and this is such a terrible thing to say. I know you're going to be like, huh. Like, I wish legalism worked. Like, I really wish it worked. And I'll tell you why. I'm the type of person, I can do a list, okay? Like, if you look at me and go, just do all these good things, you'll be good. I'll be like, check that mess off. Yes, please. And then God's like, but also you have to have your heart right. And I'm like, but about that, though. Right? Like, I got a lot of sardonic things I want to say in my heart about everything, about everyone that happens. I don't say it out loud all the time, but I keep it here. Like, don't ask me to get my heart right. But Jesus flips the script every time and he goes, look, it's not just the externally expressed reality, it's what's here that matters. He says right there again, he says the next commandment is don't commit adultery. In the exact same passage in Matthew 5, he says, hey, you've heard it said don't commit adultery, namely don't have sex with somebody you're not married to, okay? Like it says that, he goes, yeah, don't do that. And they're like, good, check, didn't do it. He goes, also, I tell you that if you just have lust in your heart towards that person, then you are out of luck. And everybody was like, okay. Right, like it was just like this is all right, now things changed. And he's flipping the script. He's going like, you think you are holding these commandments to be true just because you've lived something out in some functional way. I'm here to tell you that your heart is flawed and it has issues and problems and things that have to be addressed. And so he's presenting these things before this guy, things he's already taught, and he didn't get it. So this is the thing I want to present to you. And things are about to get a little bit real for some of you. So sorry, I've been away for 2 weeks. Gear up. A self-justified perspective forges a path of self-destruction and relational trauma. How's that for a point? A self-justified perspective forges a path of self-destruction and relational trauma. Let me connect both to what's going on in this passage and back even to the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 6 and what's going on here and what I'm trying to get at. You might say, Seth, well, where's the self-destruction in what's going on with the rich young ruler? Oh, there's a lot of self-destruction. It's that he thinks he's got it figured out. He thinks he's on the right path, and he's blind to the fact that he's anything but. And at the end of that road is separation from God and the truest and purest and most terrible form of destruction there is in that separation from God. That's self-destructive. When you think that you're pursuing things in the right way and you're missing it, it terrifies me to ever be in that kind of a context. Beyond that, what occurs is even when we are hurting ourselves and blind to our own actions and our own perspectives, skewed nature, what occurs is that we don't want to admit it, but the people who experience the most traumatic things from that aren't just us, it's the people we care about most, and we don't want to acknowledge that or believe it, but they are. So, Matthew 6 in the Sermon on the Mount is a few verses I want to focus in on. Now, if you've studied this section of Scripture before, you will be familiar most likely with some of them. There's one I imagine you have not highlighted, and it is incredibly significant, okay? It is one that has been forming for me in my person holistically. When you hear me say, and I say this consistently from stage, I am terrified, I have a fear, and fear's not from the Lord. So like, it's something I have to work on. It's not something that's good. When I have a fear that I will wake up one day and have had all these blind spots in my life, and I have just left a wake of bodies, more or less, of people that I have hurt, things that I have done, whatever, and because I had no perspective, I've had no accountability, stuff like that, there's a fear of mine. I don't want to be that. I've seen that happen too many times in other people in my life, and I don't want that for me. I don't want that for my family. When I say that, this is the verses I'm talking about. If you ever hear me talk about that ever again, okay? Specifically the latter part of verse 23, as you'll see in a second, because you'll be familiar with verse 2 possibly. 19, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. This is going to be significant when we go back to Matthew 19 in a second. So keep these words in your mind. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves don't break in and steal. For where your treasure is, remember I told you your attention, your affection, your treasures are where you will find the things that actually control you and the Lord of your life. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. 22, this is where things shift. 22 through 23 is the one that we weirdly skip over, and we almost skip directly to 24. The eye is the lamp of the body. And if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. And as you're about to see in the latter part of 23, what's getting at here is this idea of our perspective, what we focus on, what we consume, what we marinate in and ponder on and think about. Like, what is the attention and the perspective we had? If it's on good things and the Lord and light, then guess what? Our person will be characterized by those things, okay? If that's what we are directed at and focused on. But if it's not, and it's on other things that we're allowing to reverse influence us in a negative way, yeah, obviously logic would dictate that then that's going to affect us adversely. 23 at the end is where it gets crazy. So if the light within you is darkness, other translations say, so if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep is that darkness? That should terrify you. You want to know why? Because it's the idea that we are capable. And you might be in this spot right now, or you might be one who, like me, has gone, man, I've had instances throughout my life where I've run into people where this is the case, and I don't know what to do in the wake of it. Where it's going, they are in such a this is the definition of self-righteousness right here, where you've gotten to a place where you look at what you're doing, which is deeply problematic, which is even at times outright hurting and creating traumatic things in people's lives around you, and you go, but it's righteousness and it's good. It means your whole understanding is flipped. And you exist in perpetual darkness to your own context and where you're at in life, let alone in tandem with other people. It's terrifying to me. I don't want to be in a place where the light that I think I have is in fact actually darkness. But we got to be careful, because we can be deeply guilty of that if we don't properly prioritize the Lord and living in that. Oh, great. So, okay, Seth, so how then do we, one, figure out what spiritual blind spots we might have, and two, respond to those properly? Thankfully, Scripture speaks to this even as we continue in the narrative about the rich young ruler. Matthew 19:20, it says this as we continue. I have kept all these, right? The young man told him, what do I still lack? If you want to be perfect, and this is where he makes it clear that he's meaning that. Other translations say complete or whole, not lacking anything. Jesus said to him, if you want to be perfect, go sell your belongings and give to the poor, and you will have treasures in heaven. Then come follow me. Obviously alluding to literally what I just read you in Matthew 6. Do not store up for yourselves treasures where moth and rust destroy, but instead store up for yourself treasures in heaven. Now, I don't know if I even read that last part to you because it's significant as well. 24, I'll read real quick. No one can serve two masters, since either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So that's 24 of Matthew 6, which is about to play out pretty significantly here when Jesus explains to his disciples why this was such a struggle point for the rich young ruler. He was storing up treasures here and not treasures in heaven. See, Jesus, up to that point, it was just symptomatic. It was, he missed things, his perspective wasn't right, but because Jesus knows everything, he knew that there was really a deeper reality that this guy was struggling with, that he cared more about his money and his financial well-being than he did the Lord. And it was his thing to the side that he was not willing to give to God. He was going to do, I'll do all this other stuff, as long as you don't ask for that. That's mine. You don't get that. That ain't how it works. And so he looks at him, he says this, and he says, look, you got to understand, you need to go and give everything away and then come follow me. Now hear me, this doesn't mean, if you are thinking this means, hey, I guess I'm supposed to sell everything and go, serve the poor or something and give up all my belongings. I mean, maybe God's going to call you to that, but I'm going to tell you right now, that's not what he's saying here. What he's saying is figure out what your thing is and give it to him. Whatever that is. Stop holding on to it. It says, when the young man heard that, he went away grieving. It broke him because he had many possessions. So here's what I got for you. Experiencing spiritual self-awareness, it's going to do one of two things. It's either going to break you, not in a good way. I've talked previously about, hey, maybe God needs to break you, and that's more of into a place of needed submission. I mean this in a place of you're going to spiral into a hole of self-deprivation and depression and anguish that is all self-inflicted, okay? You could do that. or it could catalyze you instead. But you choose that. You choose which of them it's going to be. Now, it doesn't mean that the emotions aren't going to just magically go away. It means you have to choose, as we've said, not to give up and to keep taking steps forward. Now, here's what I want you to do. If you're in a place of like, okay, Seth, well, how do I do that then? How do I figure this out? I'm going to ask two dangerous things of you. I'm going to ask you to pray a dangerous prayer and to ask a dangerous question. So here you go. Here's your homework. If you want to pray a dangerous prayer, pray this. God, please reveal to me any blind spots or things I am prioritizing over you. That's a very dangerous prayer. Why is it a dangerous prayer? Because he might do what? He might show you. And you're going to have to deal with that. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be very painful. Here's a dangerous question you can ask. Ask a spiritual influence in your life, name somebody you look up to spiritually and who knows you, knows your heart, knows your current context. This isn't somebody who knew you when you were like, 15 and now you're in your 40s. Like, that's not what I'm talking about here. Somebody who's doing life with you now, who knows where you're at in this current context of life and who's pouring into you in some way and that you have sought that out in that relationship. Go to that person and ask them, hey, do I have any blind spots in my life or any things that I have improperly prioritized? Now hear me. Let me point some out to you, and I'm about to sideswipe some of you. I apologize in advance. Not really. If you looked at me in that moment and internally went, Seth, I don't know that I have anybody who I can go to in that regard, then you know your blind spot. That's it. None of us are above discipleship. There's no passage that says, hey, by this time in your life, you're good. You don't have to have people who are pouring into you anymore. Just kind of stay the course. Not a thing. So seek that out. But if you have that, and if you've established it, or if you seek it out and do establish it, here's what you need to make sure you do in the wake of asking that very dangerous question. You need to listen. You need to not be defensive. You need to not be dismissive. And you don't need to write off what they said as a personal attack. And every bit of that's very difficult. Because if they're a person who actually cares about you, whether you want to admit it or not, it was incredibly difficult for them to actually have to say that to you. Because that's not fun. There's no like personal like, yay, glad I had that conversation, endorphin rush. Like that's not ever how that goes, okay? If it was, then you went to the wrong person, just to be clear, okay? Right? They're not in a spiritual space that they could pour into you. But these are two dangerous things you can do. And if you do it properly, and if you actually have blind spots, because, idealistically, we can get to a place where we're so pursuing Jesus that while we still have our struggles, we at least hopefully don't have these massive blind spots. But then that can be revealed to you. Now, here's something that I think that's really cool in this passage as we continue into verse 23 of Matthew 19. That really is very centric and has been thus far onto the individual who really feels they're in a good spot and there's some blind spots. That can either just be some low-key ignorance of where they're prioritizing things, or it can be outright they're inflicting very traumatic things on other people without even realizing it. That's those who you've interacted with in your life before who are either outright narcissists or have narcissistic tendencies. That's kind of the extreme version of that. And then there's other versions where it's just ignorance to what they're doing and not even acknowledging or realizing it for any number of circumstances, okay? And so with that in view, Jesus' disciples kind of start asking him some questions in the wake of this guy walking away broken. It says, Jesus said to his disciples, truly I tell you, it will be hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. 25, when the disciples heard this, they were utterly astonished. Very intense phrasing. And asked, then who can be saved? Now, that doesn't mean anything to you if you don't understand the cultural context. In that day and age, in Jewish culture of the time, they viewed monetary affluence as a direct sign of God's favor, okay? So whenever Jesus goes, I'm telling you, it's gonna be real difficult for rich people to go to heaven, they go, well, then who is gonna go? Because we were under the impression they were at the front of the line. Like that was like what we thought, how that worked. And Jesus is not saying intrinsically that if you've done well for yourself, you're out of luck, okay? What he's saying is that if you've gotten to a place where money is so significant and matters to you as the rich young ruler, as you've allowed anything, whether it's money or something else, to get to a place of control, it's going to be difficult for you to fully follow him, let alone surrender to him completely, because that thing is your Lord. And he says, in such a way that's incredibly strange, but really powerful, he says, again, I tell you this, it is easier for a camel, the largest animal they had in that area as a reference point, to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. Like, he wasn't even subtle about it. He's like, let me be real intense about like how intense I mean this. So 26, Jesus looked at them and said, when they said, how? Like, who then? Who could be saved? Like, how does that work? Jesus looked at them and said, with man, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. With man, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. So as we shift now, I shift and talk to you, much as Jesus was trying to talk to the disciples, who are people who are interacting with other people who may be in the situation of the rich young ruler. So if you're a person who, maybe you're prioritizing these things properly, you've got good accountability, you're not in echo chambers where you're just letting people tell you what you want to hear and you're really trying to prioritize things properly, but you see and have experienced over the years people who are doing these things and you find yourself at the brunt of that. Let me be clear about two things up front. You'll never hear me say is that you shouldn't have proper boundaries. You absolutely need to. It's very biblical. Doesn't mean that you should just allow yourself to be in the situation where abuse of any kind is inflicted on you. That is not what you will hear me say ever, okay? But what I will tell you is there are two responses you can have in the face of any of those interactions. Now, what I will also do is brag on Pastor Tim last week, because he literally, without having any idea that I was going to be doing this, in front of you, lived these out. Crazy cool. So he tells you in this place of just deep vulnerability, where he's talking about something that he really has shown to be something that's an idol in his life and stuff. And he talks to you, and he talked about a bully in his life named Tom. And he says of Tom these words, okay? Tom, and he looked at the camera. He did it. We were in the car riding back home listening to it. And I cried at this point. Taylor's like, you crying? I was like, I'm not crying, you're crying. He said, Tom, if you ever see this, I forgive you, and I hope Jesus is reigning in your heart too. And Tim did the exact two things that I'm gonna give you advice to do today. If you're in a situation where somebody's in a place where the light they think they have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is, and they can't hear it, you gotta understand something. You can't save them. It's too big for you. Their whole reality and perspective is flipped upside down. You're out of luck. But the final point that I have for you is this. Though it may seem impossible sometimes, though you can't do it, Jesus can save anyone. That's why the name of this whole thing today is Through the Eye of a Needle. Yeah, with man it's impossible, but with God he can save. So your response and mine, if we're in that situation, is twofold. We need to pray for them, which is actively what Tim was doing last week, this idea that we'll pray for them that God will reveal things to them and they will turn to him and he will draw them to him. Because if you're in one of those kind of relationship dynamics, you and I both know, whether you want to admit it or not, it's going to take literal divine intervention. And you need to pray for that. And if they ask you, and they ask a hard question, you need to have the courage to speak the truth in love to them. And finally, the other thing that Tim did is you need to forgive them. That means you release them of the judiciary bond that they owe you. Does that sound like somebody else? Just as God did for us. And it's not going to be easy. It's not easy. You're going to have to forgive. That doesn't mean you don't set boundaries. That doesn't mean you allow yourself to be beat up. But it means you forgive. And you don't let that control you. And you release them to God and you pray for them that God will, in fact, restore them. Can we be a church who's that way? Can we be a people? It's going to change things. It will change our culture and our community if we can just live any bit of this out. of just being bold enough to ask the hard questions and pray the hard prayers about ourselves, if we'll go out there and love people who, hear me, don't deserve it. In the same chapter in Matthew 5, he goes, look, when people persecute you and they attack you, how about you turn the other cheek and let them just waylay you? How about that? And you forgive them. If we live that way, it's going to mess people up in all the right ways. I want to be that way. I'm not always that way, but I'm working on it. And I pray that we'll be people who don't give up and continue to work on it. So let's be people who walk in submission to Jesus. Because friend, I promise you there's freedom on the other side. Let's pray. Father in heaven, I thank you that you're good and that your mercies are new every morning, and that it is not through my own power that I am even fractionally capable of stepping into forgiveness that you have called me to. But through your power, we can. But I pray now that you will just move in lives and that you will empower us to ask the hard questions and pray the hard prayers and the dangerous prayers. Because we know you've done it before and you'll do it again, and we know that you'll reveal what you need to reveal to us. Not because we want to be beat down, but because we want to be everything that you want us to be. So move in our lives. Change us from the inside out. We love you, Jesus. It's your name we pray. Amen. Well, hey, I've got something for you as we kind of pivot to the end and transition and about to send you on your way. As we get to the end of the year, there's a lot about even just literally this past week that's so much about Thanksgiving and gratitude and all this. And man, we're just celebrating. God's just been doing crazy, inexplicable things in and through the life of our church. And if you've been with us for this last year, I'm sure you've seen and experienced. We've just shared God's story after God's story with the staff. Fun fact, up to today, and we're having more baptisms after this service, so I'm like, go ahead and allude to that. Up to today, we've had 133 people this year alone get baptized in our church at large. That's crazy. Year's not over yet. And already, year's not over yet. We're still baptizing more people. We got a whole pipeline of folks. They're still getting baptized at the end of the year. You can be baptized if you want to. Let us know. We'll make it happen. We'll meet with you, answer any questions you have, walk through it. And Cody's going to be doing announcements in a second. I'm stealing all of his stuff. We want to talk to you about that. But that 133 is already the most we've ever had in 1 year in the history of our church. That's crazy, okay? God's just been doing crazy stuff as he's been drawing people to himself, moving in our lives. And so what we're wanting to do as we pivot into the latter part of the year, and I don't know if you're this way, but we as a household are this way, and our staff are this way as well, as we're thinking through being gracious and gratitude. One thing we always want to do is, in the wake of what we're thankful for that God has done, we want to give back to him, okay? And so we've got an initiative that we're just calling Gratitude at the end of the year, which typically you, if you've been with us, would know that it was referred to up to this point really as Jesus for the World. And we're actually being a little bit more focused with it at large and making it threefold, okay? So the first one is Metro Outreach, which was really, truly the Jesus for the World initiative, but we have our own very clear, pointed outreach that in the beginning of January, I'll be sharing just a number of things God's done through that throughout this past year already. But everything, if you want to give to that, moving towards the end of the year, then that literally every dime of it doesn't stay here. It goes out to nonprofits that we're partnered with here, both locally in Vandalia, and international partners. We've got so many amazing, I was talking to one of our partners who digs wells in Africa over the break. I mean, just crazy, amazing work for the Lord and just using that as a gospel tool. And so if you give to that, all of it goes to them. We don't see a dime of it. And the second one is our All In initiative. So if you're new with us, you don't probably know about that, but a few years back, we stepped together into a commitment as we're all in across both here in Vandalia to help our Vandalia campus get their own building. They've been set up tear down, something we deeply take for granted here for the better part of 2 decades. And so we're moving to that. Actually, I'll show you all here's some an update on that project because the building's coming along.
Pastor Tim here, Metro Vandalia campus. We are very excited about this building and it's coming along. And I want to take you through and show you around a little bit because things are happening. I want to show you some of the rooms because we actually have the framing up to actually see the rooms. but I also wanted to talk about maybe some of the things that you don't just see when you see a room. So let's go check out some of this here in the building. We are so excited about this auditorium and just what people are going to be able to experience here and have moments with God and feel the love from His church, but also His love as they're walking in with who knows what, coming from who knows where, and they're going to get to experience that. Here we have the Next Steps room, and where we're going to be actually baptizing people in our lobby, where people are going to experience the love from Metro and experience community, and it's going to be the first step where they have that new experience. Down the hallway here we have our next gen areas in our offices, so Metro kids and Metro students, where the next generation is going to get to experience the love of Jesus and the fact that He gave His life for them, and that they can take that next step with Jesus even at a younger age. And we're excited about all that can happen in these spaces, and our staff even leading well through the offices, being able to spiritually lead and counsel people. We're so happy that you're along for this journey with us. Keep praying for us. We're excited to see what God's going to do through this building.
So it's coming along like crazy every time I go, yeah, it was really cool. It's like really, if you didn't know it, it's that far along already. Like we're getting closer and closer for them having a home. We're going to celebrate that here in a few months whenever that wraps up and everything. But full transparency with you, I want to just speak some finances with you real quick, just so you know where we're at with that. Our goal was $3.5 million to build that. We ended up landing with pledges at 3.1. We are on pace to hit that 3.1. But when it's all said and done, as any of you who've tried to do any semblance of construction over the course of the last number of years post-COVID, even since we did that initiative, those prices have gone up, and it's actually going to cost us right at $4.3 million is what it's going to cost. So we got a little ways to go. Yeah, stuff is crazy right now. Maybe don't build. Right? It's, if you're like, hey, we should build our dream home, wait a few years. Right? But if you want to help us out in that regard and lean in and really support what God's doing in Vandalia, and that's what you'd like to give to, we really would love to see you step into that. And then finally, it's just our general giving to what God's doing here at Metro at large. This doesn't just all magically happen, right? It's through just the generosity of our people. So in any way, this is all in this gratitude deal and above and beyond deal heading into the holidays. But you can choose any of those three. You can only give to one of those. You can give to two, three, whatever you want to do. We just wanted to give you options when it comes to if you're feeling led, just give back to the Lord in some specific way. So anyways, I'll throw it over to Cody as we wrap. Love you guys.